Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this session on the third sector's capacity building. My name is Ioanna Kiosse, and this is my colleague, Rosalind Benjamin, and together we will moderate this session. Now I would like to introduce our speakers. Jennifer Clarke. Jennifer is a specialist in third sector capacity building with a long-standing experience in this field. Jennifer will speak about the advantages of multiple dimensions and approaches to capacity building, both in terms of people and organizational developments. And next to Jennifer is Christine Castille. Christine is the Membership Services Director of the European Venture Philanthropy and has a vast experience in foundation and not-for-profit organization. Christine will present examples of capacity building within this sector. And last but not least, Asteris Houliaras is a professor of comparative politics and international relations in the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Peloponnese, and specializes in North-South relations and Greek civil society. He is currently coordinates the European Union program entitled Thalis, which aims to map and evaluate non-profit organizations operating in Greece. He will describe the third sector in Greece and will analyze the strength and challenges of capacity building strategies in this context. At this point, I would like to mention that Professor Asteris Houliaras and Jennifer Clarke are involved in the Educational Philanthropy program, which is an initiative undertaken by the Stavros Niarchos Foundation in 2012 with the dual aim. On the one hand, it aims to build capacity for Greek non-profit organization, and on the other hand, to offer postgraduate students the opportunity to learn how the philanthropic sector should work. And now to our subject. The third sector plays a key role in the transformation of the social welfare state into a social welfare society. The third sector needs to build solid foundations and to create efficient tools. It needs to work on organizational and financial transparency and should provide appropriate training for staff and volunteers. In order to be in the position to deliver holistic services, the third sector needs to focus on capacity building. But how do we define capacity building? Is there a specific strategy? Is it possible for the third sector to build capacity building during a socioeconomic crisis? I think through this session, many such questions will be answered, and we encourage all of you to have as many as possible questions and to share your ideas and thoughts in order to have a constructive discussion. Now we'll begin with Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. I've come across a wide range of approaches to third sector capacity building. So when I was trying to think about a unique selling point I could bring to the session today, I decided in the end it would have to be not having a unique selling point at all, because what I really want to put forward is the value of taking a broad perspective on third sector capacity building, on having an appreciation for the bigger picture when it comes to the politics and the history of third sector capacity building, taking into account different standpoints, and having an appreciation of the wide range of activities and approaches there are in this field. I think it's firstly valuable to have take a broader perspective on the politics of capacity building. As we've heard, one current interest is in strengthening civil society as part of moves from a social welfare state model towards a social welfare society model. And I think that's very relevant, particularly here in Greece. But you don't have to follow that line of logic to believe in the value of strengthening civil society. Other agendas which have also highlighted the importance of this include those of building open and democratic societies, supporting community development, and striving for global justice and solidarity, to name just a few. And I think it's important to stress this wide relevance of third sector capacity building so that nobody dismisses its importance just because they may disagree with one of the agendas supporting it. I think it's also useful to be aware of the history of third sector capacity building. It's certainly not a new concept, and in fact you could say it's been a pretty busy century in this field. Just to give a few examples, supporting civil society played a role in the recovery from the First World War in the UK. It was also important after the Second World War, both in US and in Germany. By the 1980s, many more countries were setting up bodies to support the development of their growing third sectors. And of course, supporting civil society also played an important role in the transitions to democracy after the fall of the Eastern Bloc. So in other words, the third sector has got a pretty strong track record of responding to change and to shock, and capacity building has often played an important role in that. Today, the third sector has got new problems, new challenges to face, but there are also new opportunities, new technologies becoming available, new actors becoming involved. So of course, we need to adapt our approaches to capacity building to take into account this new context. But as we do so, I think it's important to remember that we've got this wealth of experience of previous generations that we can build on. I think it's also useful to be able to take a broader perspective on the divide that's sometimes perceived between bottom-up and top-down approaches to capacity building. One valid criticism is that sometimes activities are designed and implemented in an overly top-down fashion that fails to take into account the knowledge and experience and understanding that actors on the ground have. Without appreciating these, capacity building activities are bound to fall short of their target. But that's not to say that external perspectives can't add value to the capacity building process. I think one of the challenges of working in this field is that as third sector practitioners, it's often difficult to be aware of our own limitations and still less of ways of addressing these. So by being open to external approaches, we can gain access to fresh thinking, to the bigger picture that our work contributes to, and possibly access to much needed resources. In other words, both sides of this have much to gain from working together in capacity building. Now, it's probably self-evident that there's no one single approach to strengthening the third sector. But I think one thing that it's particularly useful to be aware of is the way in which different actors have really driven the capacity building process in different countries. So, for example, in the Netherlands, individual third sector organisations have independently maintained a very strong capacity, thanks in part to the high levels of public support for civil society organisations. In the UK, there's a very well-developed network of second-tier organisations working to support civil society at a local level. In France, it's at a national level that second-tier organisations are particularly well organised. One of the main bodies has got almost 600,000 associations as members, giving the sector a huge potential for collective representation. In the United States, a whole science is developed around the ways in which private philanthropy and private foundations can help support the sector. And in Sweden, for example, the state itself, through its system of consultation with civil society organisations, has helped to develop their capacity in the field of policy development. Now, of course, this diversity of approaches reflects very specific circumstances in each country, and it would be naive to think we could simply cut and paste successful practices to new contexts. But I do think there's more scope for cross-border sharing of this rich experience that different actors have gained in various aspects of capacity building. But these established approaches are also shifting as new actors become involved: academia, private sector, social enterprises, just to name a few. And as these new approaches mixed with the old, there's a whole kaleidoscope of capacity building work that we can draw inspiration from. So with that in mind, I just want to finish by giving a few examples of activities which seemed particularly relevant to highlight the diversity of work in this field today. And I've split this into 3 sections. Working to develop the capacity of individuals is of course important, but on its own it's not sufficient, because no matter how skilled individuals are, they'll never be able to reach their full potential if we don't also work to build effective third sector organisations and enabling institutional environments. So at the individual level, there are more and more opportunities for flexible learning available. More universities are offering courses that are relevant to the third sector. These are often available online and even for free, for example, via the Open Culture website. Virtual internships are also a growing way for individuals to gain skills. One way of supporting the development of organisations is to import skills from other sectors. The Greek NGO Citizens Movement is working to do just this by recruiting retired professionals as volunteer consultants. I think it's an excellent new initiative, and I think we've actually got someone here who can tell us a little bit more about this afterwards. Another approach is to support organisations in increasing their engagement with their supporters. The Greek private company, Joko, is working to do this. And at an institutional level, one important area of activity is to promote transparency and public confidence in the sector as a whole. State actors can be important here. For example, the UK government's Charity Commission took the important initiative of making its database of organisations and their financial information available online. But non-state actors can also play an important role. The US not-for-profit organisation GuideStar has been credited with bringing transparency to the sector in the US. Now, I know both Christine and Asteris have got other ideas and experiences to share with us today, and I hope that some of you do too. I think the more that we in this field can talk to each other, the broader the perspective we can take on our work, and the better equipped we're going to be to conduct capacity building work that rises to today's challenges. So with that in mind, I just want to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for giving us the opportunity to be here and share experiences in this way today, and of course to thank you for your interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. You mentioned how important collaboration between individuals, organizations, and institutions is. So I was wondering, in that context, what role would you say networking plays in capacity building? And what type of networking would you recommend for different types of organizations, based on your experience?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, because I think networking is really crucial. But I think it's something perhaps we hear so often in the third sector that it can become almost a bit of a cliche. And what really opened my eyes up again to how important networking is in this sector was when I conducted my own research. When I was doing my PhD in the UK, I conducted a survey of civil society organisations. And what I saw again and again was that very small organisations with little or even no funding could conduct an amazing range of activities equivalent to organisations that were actually a lot bigger financially, provided that there were members of support networks. So the organisations that I saw and I worked with had access to volunteers, to office space, shared office space, to rooms they could conduct their activities in, access to information, of course, to information about funding opportunities, to legal advice, and also access to decision makers through the support networks that they were part of. But of course, the problem in this sector is that it's actually very rare for organisations to come together and start networking spontaneously, because there's also very much a tendency for us to be distrustful of other organisations and see them as rivals for funding and things. And I've been there, I've felt like that as well. And I think that's one of the reasons that formalised networks, and especially second-tier structures, whether federations or formal support networks, are really important for building capacity. because they provide a formality of structure and a scale of membership that really makes sure that the balance of opportunities and risks are really tipped in favour of networking for organisations. And I think that's possibly one of the areas of civil society that is lagging behind in Greece. There aren't so many formalised networks, support structures, second-tier organisations, and that could possibly be a useful focus for capacity building work here.
Thank you. And now over to Christine Castille.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. We have been hearing over the last days during this conference that governments are cutting down on... thank you. Whoa. That governments are cutting down in expenditures, that they're downsizing, which is a problem. But it can also be seen as an opportunity for other actors to step in and to become active, to take up an active role next to the state, to tackle issues that are dear to them, to co-shape, and to become a co-owner of that public good instead of delegating it to the state every time. And I think this is that this works very empowering. Actually, this situation is a very empowering situation. We should take advantage of it. Earlier this week in Brussels, we had the closing reception of Ashoka. And there, some of the officials of Ashoka shared some numbers, interesting numbers, disturbing numbers, challenging numbers, and I want to share them with you, if this works. Okay, in the last 15 years, 46,000 new for-profits were able to scale up. In the last 15 years, only 114 social profits were able to scale up. And these are exactly those enterprises we need to change from a social welfare state to a social welfare society. We need those new social entrepreneurs with new inclusive business models to be able to scale up their model. So why do we only have 114 of them? This is a key question we should be looking at. When I take the venture philanthropy perspective, I would say that there is a lack of access to financial resources, but also a lack of access to capacity. I want to very briefly introduce you to this venture philanthropy model that stress that you need to put in place several elements to be able to grow new social organizations, to become impactful. And afterwards, I will focus on the capacity building. So the first of these elements is a high engagement. You need to be at the side of the organization you're going to support, not ask just once a year a report. It's really to be side by side, to be their sounding board. You have to be supporting him, her, to build the organizational capacity of the organization. You need to provide tailored financing. At the beginning, they will need grants because they don't have any activities that generate resources. Later on, when they grow, when they're mature, they will need other type of finances. They will need loans, they might need equity. And if you can't provide that, others will do. But it's very important to build an ecosystem in which these social enterprises can grow. And everybody there needs to take up his responsibility. You have foundations, you have companies, you have individuals, everybody has a key role to play there. Non-financial support, that's what I'm going to talk more about in a couple of minutes. The involvement of networks. These social enterprises have very strong social networks, but they lack access to the economic networks. And there, again, the person who is granting, investing, plays a role. Multi-year support. And here I want to challenge the room because I've been around in this sector for about 20 years. I do not know of one project organization that was able to develop in 6 years into a self-supporting organization. So please take that multi-year approach. It's key to build strong organizations. And then, and I know that George Soros had another point of view on this, but we believe it is key to at least take measurements seriously. You need some kind of indicators to see if your model is indeed addressing the right needs and that you're progressing on that. I don't say that you will be able to measure everything and that there are problems of attribution, but do put into place some kind of indicators. Okay, capacity building. Capacity building is done by those who invest in these organizations, be it foundations, be it funds, corporations, even NGOs invest in certain social enterprises, but it can also be done by individuals, by you and me. We can all take responsibility here. You can provide time, and I don't need to explain that. You can also provide competences, and Jennifer talked about these networks. You have in many European countries networks that make that bridge between the profit and the non-profit, between experts, professionals of the profit sector that are willing to give pro bono time to non-profit in order to increase their capacity, to build stronger organizations, to be able to scale up. In the US, you would have Taproots with over 15,000 volunteers. In France, you have Passerelle et Compétences, you have Innovation Lab. In Germany, they are now putting into place German pro bono. In the UK, you will have Inspiring Scotland, and you will have Pilot Light. In Belgium, Toolbox. So in many places, and I've no idea, I'm sure that in Italy and in the other countries too, but I haven't mapped them all those provide professional networks in which professionals can provide time in a successful way and building stronger social profits. Besides individuals, we also have companies that have to play a role there. The most modest role, I would say, is provided by CSR programs. Very low profile, the team building days where with a team of 30, 40 people you come and clean up a park, paint a school, etc. You can also provide pro bono projects. You see that in the large law firms, in the large consultancy firms that they do 1, 2, 3 pro bono projects a year, building the capacity of these pro bono, very important. You can take it one step further. Yesterday I heard some very interesting numbers. 72% of youngsters who want the Y generation, as they're called, who are now on the labor market, are interested in getting a job that will also be meaningful to society. And 85% of them are willing to take a lower wage for that. So as a company, you might be interested in attracting these young professionals and be serious about the societal impact you want to make. And you can develop then, for example, an employee involvement project in which your employees will be able to reinforce, to support the scaling up of a social profit organization. And finally, the upper level class would sit together at the table with such a social entrepreneur who was able already to make the proof of his model, and together with that company, he will scale up. You have there several examples of it. You have Danone and Grameen with a very successful story in Bangladesh, but you also have Schneider Electric, and the Shell Foundation do an exceptional job in having this bottom of the pyramid access to electricity, access to employment, access to capacity. And it is just by putting these networks of for-profit sectors who know how to manage companies with those social entrepreneurs who have this brilliant idea to tackle a societal problem, be health, be poverty, be education, in a different way, you put them together, and then you have this huge impact, and that's what is important. So I would say my message here is that we can all be be an actor, an important actor of change in this capacity building, be it at individual level, be it in the foundation we're in, be it in the company, and really take this one step further in order to have this number of 114 increase, because it's crucial for our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I just have a question. You mentioned during your presentation the human involvement, individuals, company. I was wondering, what is the role of technology in building capacity?
I have, yes, technology is key, because the social problems need to be tackled in a different way. You have to reduce costs, and technology can be a very good lead to that. In Belgium last year, they put together experts in poverty, if I may say so, it sounds a bit bizarre, and IT people. They put them together for 4 days, and they said, look, you have to look at the different ways to certain problems as to what poverty is concerned. Come up with new examples. And then in October, they presented some of the products that some of the ideas they came up with. And one was something similar to something that I heard yesterday in a panel. You have in the cities small shops, groceries, etc., who have perishables. And many times these perishables are thrown away because they're not sold. Now, these IT people developed an app in which these grocery stores, these small restaurants, the neighborhood restaurants can log into and just put in, okay, I have this to give away. There is a large network of volunteers, all by bike. They come by, they are also logged into that app, they come by, take up this, all these foods, all these perishables, and bring them there where it's needed. It's just one example, but it has been cost-cutting, and it has enabled the organization to remain active, because before it was through cell phones, it was through messages, it needed a lot of coordination, and now with the application they were really able to decrease their operational costs and to stay in business. And there are other examples I can talk to you about.
Okay, thank you very much. And now, over to you, Professor Asteris Houliaras.
Yes, thank you. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation in Greek, but then I realized that my co-panelists have spoken in English. And then I'll switch to English as well.
You're free to present, if you would like to present it in Greek.
I'll do it in English.
There's no problem.
Thank you. There is also another reason for this. I couldn't find a proper term for translating capacity building into Greek.
It's true.
And this is, I mean, an important, I think it's the most important issue at the moment as far as the Greek civil society is concerned. So I'm going to focus on Greek civil society. Now, I like very much quantitative indicators, and indicators show very clearly that organized civil society in Greece is weak. It's not only weak, it's very weak. In fact, it's the weakest, probably, organized civil society in Europe. And all the relevant indicators are very disturbing. And if you read the European Social Survey, then you can see that Greeks have among the lowest indicators of interpersonal trust in Europe. For example, the number of Greeks that think that people care only about themselves instead of helping other people is around 60%, while the average number in Europe is about the half, 30%. And most Greeks argue that we should not trust other people. The number is 60%, and then the average number in Europe is around 40%. And here you can see the percentage of people expressing high level of trust in others, and you can see that Greece has among the lowest figures in the OECD, among OECD countries. It's true that richer countries trust more. For example, Norwegians or the Danes trust more than the others. But then you can see huge differences between countries with similar income. Compare, for example, Greece with Spain. Community tolerance is another indicator of trust, of interpersonal trust. And here you can see that community tolerance in Greece is also among the lowest in Europe. And again, household income cannot explain differences. The Charities Aid Foundation, I think that a representative of Charities Aid Foundation is here in this conference, produces every year a World Giving Index that classifies countries according to time and money that people devote to social, philanthropic causes. And it's very disturbing that among 160 countries, Greece has the lowest levels of giving in the world. I mean, Greece is in the 157th position among 160 countries. I mean, for a social scientist, this is amazing. And then, active citizenship. According to the European Social Survey, how many people belong to voluntary organizations? And Greece has among the lowest figures, in fact, the lowest figure with Hungary in Europe. Then we have other indicators that show that Greece is a very materialistic society. When they ask people how they react to the statement, it is important to be rich, have money and expensive things, then Greece appears among the more materialistic countries in the wider European area, together with Russia, Israel, and the Czech Republic. A crucial question then is why civil society in Greece is weak. And you know, social scientists have offered a number of explanations, ranging from the country's Ottoman past to its historical development, noting vertical clientelistic networks, talking about partocracy, the dominance of political parties, an opportunistic political culture, a density of family ties, an ineffective state, lack of civic education, individualistic social norms, and of course, strong materialistic values. Organized civil society in Greece. How many NGOs do we have? I'm directing a project trying to count the number of NGOs in Greece that have beneficiaries beyond their immediate vicinity, beyond their immediate neighborhood. And the number is close to 500. No more than 500 NGOs in Greece have activities that go beyond their neighborhood. Most of them are weak organizations with a small number of members, and quite a lot of them are one-man shows or one-woman shows, in the sense that one person dominates the whole organization. If the person dies or loses his or her interest, then the organization dies as well. Then we have complete lack of horizontal cooperation. Jennifer Clarke has noted that in a number of countries, support networks play a crucial role. In Greece, there are a few federations, but they are very weak. And then most of the organizations are based on state funding, and the state funding in Greece, until quite recently, was not very demanding, in the sense that it was largely based to clientelistic networks, personal contacts, or this need to absorb money. So the crucial question is, can the economic crisis strengthen Greek civil society? You can argue in favor or you can argue against this. Yes, because the economic crisis creates new forms of solidarity. It undermines traditional social norms and mobilizes people. And the answer is also no, because the economic crisis lessens community tolerance, increases racism, increases individualistic behavior. So, doesn't work. So, how we can improve capacity building? We have two ways. We can train existing NGO staff in designing, implementing, and evaluating complex humanitarian and developmental projects. And then, as you said, as Christine said, we can mobilize people with skills to join NGOs and work for them. Now, I did with the Stavros Niarchos Foundation support and with my colleague, Professor Lialgovas, an autumn school, training NGO staff on designing and implementing developmental projects. And also we have produced a book that has been distributed in 500 organizations all over the country. But I do believe that what is needed is long-term activities. The crucial factor is what George Soros has said, civic education. There is no basic civic education in Greek schools. Then an important factor is NGOs and grassroots organization image in the media. The media in Greece is very critical of NGOs. They accuse them as crooks, as having secret objectives, and they don't help to create trust. So there is need to change the way the media treat NGOs. And then a crucial factor, as Jenny has said, is create support networks, like the Charity Commission in the United Kingdom. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think a lot of what you described comes down to a lack of trust in Greece.
Yes.
And that's one of the biggest weaknesses for civic society in Greece. So I was wondering, what suggestions would you have to overcome that lack of trust, whether it's increasing transparency, and in what ways could we do that?
It's not easy. I mean, it takes a lot of time. Interpersonal trust is linked to trust in institutions. So if we have a legal system that works, if we have a state that works, then interpersonal trust will increase as well. If you know that if someone doesn't pay the rent and you should go to court and wait for 10 years for a decision, then interpersonal trust cannot be created. So interpersonal trust and trust to institutions is closely linked. So what we need is introduce reforms, change the way our polity and our state works, and this in turn will increase interpersonal trust. Okay? But anyway, we have an individual also responsibility, and our individual responsibility is all of us try to behave differently. Try to be more cooperative. I mean, in Greek universities, each professor wants to kill the other professor. So we have an individual responsibility. Try to behave differently in our families, in our community, in our work. Try to be more cooperative with others. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to open up the floor to our audience now. If you have questions, if you have experiences you'd like to share. And I think there's a microphone coming.
Thank you very much. Interesting speakers and gentlemen at the same time. My question is, during the crisis, we've seen the increase of solidarity and at the same time the increase of unemployment, a big part of it being young people. So this is a great opportunity for volunteerism. Some support networks could be linked to volunteerism as well, but we haven't seen a really big organized way for Greeks to start offering their free time towards increasing capacity buildings for NGOs and in general being more part of a civil society. What is your point of view and how do you think this can be bridged? Thank you.
Would you like me to? Jenny is probably more.
Professor Houliaras could give us the example in Greece, but maybe you have been exposed to examples from around the world.
Jenny also has Greek experiences.
So anyone contribute?
I'll give you my view on this. It's not a definitive view, and I'd be interested to hear what other members of the audience have to say as well. I think there are quite a lot of new volunteer initiatives setting up. I've seen time bank initiatives being set up in quite a lot of the municipalities. There's this citizens movement new project to work with retired volunteers. But I think the problem really comes back to collaboration again. There's lots of different small-scale initiatives, and I think they could be a lot stronger if we could build the links between them. I think that's really the point I wanted to make, but I'd be really interested to kind of reflect this question back to the audience as well and know what you think about this.
Just a short comment. We see an increase of voluntary activities throughout the country. But what is really missing is to think beyond your immediate neighborhood. I mean, there are very few volunteers that are willing to work outside their small geographical area. I mean, locality is deeply entrenched in Greek culture. So the problem is not number of volunteers, but how to push volunteers outside their own small
comfort zone.
Yes, comfort zone.
I think there are three issues that I wanted to bring up, and there are also questions to the panelists. One, the impact of a regulator. We don't have a third sector regulator in Greece, similar to the UK, England and Wales Commission. So the question would be, my hunch would be that we need a regulator to push for the upgrade of third sector performance and integrity. And I know Professor Houliaras would say that one of the problems is that our regulatory authorities also lack credibility in Greece, but we have to start from somewhere. Relating to the issue of the regulator is tax exemption. We're going through a massive fiscal crisis. Our state is trying to expand our fiscal base. It's closing down one tax loophole after another, but it's throwing the baby with the bathwater too. At the moment when we most need the third sector, it is becoming undernourished because the tax exemptions are not there to support donations to third sector activity. And the third issue that I wanted to raise is Professor Houliaras alluded to that, it's not a question of localism, but it's also of familism. Some of our most major non-profit organizations are family dominated. So, and that's one of the reasons it has crippled their fundraising capacity. Because when and I'm talking about major museums and other philanthropic organizations, they're still dominated by their founders, some of them a century ago. And so there's an inhibition in these institutions' ability to fundraise and over-reliance to state finance, because fundraising will mean a dilution of control, because you have to bring other people to the board, lose control, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
I think someone from the audience would like to answer this question, and then you can answer.
But I think it's a very important point about the regulatory. But I would really suggest that before the state starts to regulate, it would be very helpful here in Greece, I could imagine, to build or associations of foundations, for example. In Germany, I'm a board member of the Association of German Foundations, which have 8,000 members out of 20,000 foundations. So there is a voice which is self-organized, and we do a lot of governance, talking about ourselves and good governance, and that protects us for over-regulation from the state. As long as we work hard on our own regulations and self-fulfilling it, that could be very helpful, and the same is on the European level. I'm a board member of EVPA, and we work hard on that before the regulation comes in, because I would be afraid here in Greece, what I heard from the professor, if there is this big mistrust between the players, it could be very dangerous. My experience, a lot of public people or politicians have no idea about the work of foundations and the role of foundation and NGOs. And so too early a kind of regulation could be also a problem. So that's just another advice.
Thank you very much. I don't know if someone from our speaker would like to add Anything else?
Yeah, I'll make a comment on the public regulator. I think it's a really important issue. And I think the strong state regulation has helped to build trust, public trust in the public sector in the UK. In the UK, voluntary organisations are among the most trusted institutions in the UK. I think you could say the opposite is the case in Greece. NGOs tend to be amongst the least trusted institutions. But that doesn't happen overnight. If you think, I think, I'm trying to remember my history dates, I'm not very good at history, but the legislation that paved the way for the Charity Commission we have in the UK was actually set up by Queen Elizabeth I, I think in 1601, anyway, a long time ago. And so the legislation has been developed since then. So, you know, we can't expect that we're suddenly going to create a state regulator overnight in Greece. And in the meantime, we might need to rely on the third sector itself to play a kind of self-regulating function. The example I just touched briefly on in my presentation was of the US organisation GuideStar, which is a website for third sector organisations. And if you're interested in either donating or getting involved in any way in a not-for-profit organisation, you can then go on that site and see what their activities are, what their funding is, what they've been doing with their money. And that it hasn't been regulated by the state, but it has provided a lot of transparency to the sector. So I think civil society really needs to come together to lobby for greater state involvement in this field. But in the meantime, I think, you know, the third sector could itself be playing a role to stop the gap in the meantime.
Just a point. Thank you for very interesting points. I mean, tax exceptions but let me focus on regulation. You can have different types of regulation, as our German friend has said. You can have state regulation, you can have self-regulation, or you can have third-party regulation. What is, however, more crucial is the distinction between hard and soft regulation. What we really need here, because this is an environment of complete lack of trust, is hard regulation. We don't need good practices guides and things like that are soft regulation. We need a clear legal framework that defines clearly what an NGO is and what an NGO can do. We know quite well that several other countries have it. I mean, the Council of Europe has produced a number of guidelines. The Greek legal framework is very weak. And unfortunately, our international funders, the Troika, have not yet focused on the civil society and third sector in Greece. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Hello, my name is Thanos Belalidis. Excuse my voice, it's not very friendly. First of all, I'd like to thank your panel for the fantastic presentations. I would like to make a comment for Mr. Houliaras. His work I have used for a long time as a fundraiser. I have been working for Greek NGOs in the past 20 years, and I have faced the problems that he has been describing for many, many years, and the results like low dedication to sectors, third sector sectors in Greece, like the environment that has been tremendously neglected in the past few years in Greece. My comment is quite straightforward, and again is related to the work of Mr. Houliaras. I believe that in order to tackle a problem, you have to acknowledge it. And for some funny reason, we Greeks, we believe that we are a society of solidarity. And I strongly believe that we are not. There is this strong notion in the Greek media that so much is done for each other and so many meals, etc., etc. And I do strongly believe that this is a drop in the ocean, as clearly stated that from the data that we just saw. And I would like to encourage Mr. Houliaras to do his best to publicize this data so that we first get to realize that the reality among Greeks is very different from what we believe it is. We may have strong family ties, maybe. We may focus on issues according to what is fashionable or in the current reality in our country, like the economic crisis now, in 2007, the forest fires, but this is not solidarity. And the first step to realize this is to acknowledge who we truly are. And I strongly encourage you to do your best to make this data as public as possible. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. I have to make a few notes about here in Greece. I will agree with Mr. Houliaras. We are a very low trust society, lack of social capital, because we have, I agree with the previous sir that spoke about it, because we have family ties. Historically, in Greece, we had family for a number of reasons. Because the countries of North Europe, they were based historically to community. Here in Greece, we had the extended family. That's why we are a country of low social capital and accumulation, so low accumulation of social capital and low social trust. I disagree with Mr. Houliaras to one point. It was very interesting. I agree to most of what he had said. But here in Greece, we also there is no solidarity between people, among people, because here the economic crisis and the initiatives that have taken by political, mainly parties, Golden Dawn, a fascist Nazi party, anarchists, leftists, are the main source of solidarity and volunteering, informal volunteering here in Greece. We have, I think, many more NGOs here in Greece, more than 500. I think a community sector is weak too, for a number of historical reasons again. There was not the problem of Ottoman Empire in Greece. Previously, in Byzantine Empire, if you didn't give money to any public officials, you couldn't do anything work. The corruption was coming from Byzantine Empire. We talked, we teach the Russian Empire and Ottomans. They haven't a state. Ottomans, they get to know the state with when they went to Constantinople. And I think the reason is we have made very specific proposals how this reality here in Greece can change dramatically and easily. Unfortunately, media, 2009, we had 120 non-governmental organizations have signed the Declaration of Civil Society Parliament. Although all the channels here in Greece were at the old House of Parliament in Athens, no channel, no one saw what happened there. And it was an institution, a new institution, which could have proposed solutions to problems so that we couldn't, so that here now the things were better. We will be better today. And the last point I have to mention is that there is a strategic how things can change in Greece. And to trust more within interpersonal relations. There is an initiative called social, I don't remember the exact name of initiative, but we can decide democratically from the basis to vote to what things we are agreed to. It's just to make it action. There are solutions.
Sorry, but we have a limited time and
Yes,
we
yes,
have a lot of questions. I'm very sorry.
Yes, of course. And I close this. And I'm sorry for this. I close to this. Many non-governmental organizations in Greece, big ones, are very corrupted. They don't know. The civil society here in Greece and citizens don't know about it because we don't have control by the government. Thank you. And I'm sorry for the time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, here.
Thank you for your very interesting presentations. My question concerns the prioritizing of capacity building. I mean, in an NGO sector that is waking up, like the Greek case, where would you advise an agent that wants to conduct capacity building activities to start from? I mean, there are organizations that have great ideas that are here to cover great social needs, but they have no legal entities, no AFIMI, and where would you advise an agent, how would you advise an agent to approach these cases, and where can someone start from?
Is for all the speakers this question, or
anyone who is willing to answer?
So,
my advice is try to persuade skilled people to be involved in NGOs.
I would advise the same. I think you can tap into existing knowledge. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are manuals existing for you to rapidly tap into this unleashed potential of the profit sector, who I'm sure is willing to put up programs or just the volunteers to come in if they have a framework, a structured framework. And these exist. You can contact these organizations in the other countries and set up such an organization here in Greece. It doesn't require a lot of resources, just a coordinator, and off you go. And wait.
Can I add something? And also create role models that have been that in the last panel, role models. I mean, people that can inspire other people.
I just wanted to add to that. I think we all seem to agree in this room that in Greece there's a lack of larger organisations, but there's quite a lot of very small, local level, perhaps informal initiatives. And this is probably, I'm reflecting this to the foundation here, because I think this is a role for foundations in general, is I think we need to also think about how we can build on the strengths here in Greece, because there are a lot of very local initiatives. They may not go beyond their neighbourhood, but there's a lack of very small grassroots funding available for these organisations. And I know it's partly to do with the capacity of foundations themselves, because how many grants can you possibly manage if you've only got a limited number of staff? But in the UK, I know there are very separate funding streams for the very tiny grassroots level, possibly informal organisations who are wanting to do work in their communities. And these have got flexible criteria, so you don't necessarily have to be registered as an organisation. And we're talking about small amounts of money here, perhaps, €1,000 or something, to do something in a school or in a neighbourhood or a basketball court. And I know this isn't going to solve the problem of underdeveloped civil society, and we have to work on different levels. But I do think there's potential in those very tiny local level organisations that we could build, but it does need a specific approach to working with grassroots communities, because those tiny networks are never going to become the big professional NGOs, and they don't want to be either. So it needs a targeted approach. And as far as I'm aware, there isn't really much work being done by foundations so far, and I think that might be an area to to look at for the future.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Xenophon Kabas. I'm from Captain Vasilis Foundation. I would like to make a question regarding the support on capacity building in the NGO sector that can be given from the other side, I mean from philanthropy or from CSR. I mean, we have seen a lot of times that strict rules of donors can make the difference and can in a way build capacity in an NGO in terms that it forces them or helps them, if you want, to have a better financial system, better transparency, better organization, measurable results, etc. So how do you see this role, let's say, of the foundations, of the corporates that are involved in philanthropy or in CSR in terms of building capacity in the NGO sector? Thank you.
Who would like to answer this question?
Well, I think these organizations are already playing a key role. You have the large corporations have CSR programs that addresses the needs of the organization, of the non-for-profit organizations in different areas. And then you have these organizations who build bridges, as I told you, that are supported by corporates too. They can trust their employee involvement to those kinds of organizations. And I believe that foundations can there also play an important role to start up such kind of organizations, to build a platform in order for corporates to provide capacity building to the not-for-profit sector.
Thank you. Okay.
Hello, my name is Maria Wasilewski, and I thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to answer two things, or talk about two things. One is the choice, how you begin an NGO in Greece, and what are some steps to take. And I agree completely on good board membership. I was lucky enough to be part of the beginning of two NGOs in Greece, one being Merimna, where I'm currently on the board still. It was a real attention to the foundation, the beginnings, a lot of detailed work in the beginning in 1995, and has resulted in a very strong, I think, and productive organization. We've also been fortunate to be funded by the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, at least on 2 occasions, and we have a very strong foundation. I think it's very important that you have a good goal, a good, what's the word I want? Statement of mission statement. Okay, so I think those are the most important things: good board membership, good mission statement. The second thing I wanted to talk about, or just say, on a positive note in Greece, and the solidarity issues and all that, is I'm hoping that the new generation, the younger, the children, okay, there's starting to be more and more education in the elementary school, and I know for a fact in the Protilikio, which is 11th or 10th grade in the American system, there's a new project that the children have to do, and they have to look at some social incident, some problem, and they have, for example, my son did internet crime and internet problems this year. This is a step in the right direction to get young people aware of what's going on out in the world and what they can do to help, what they can do to make a difference. I think it should start even earlier. When I was growing up in the States, when I was 7 in Girl Scouts, we went out and picked up garbage. Without gloves, without worry, black bags. And, that was over 40 years ago, and that stuck with me. It stayed with me to go on and work where I work now, which is largely in volunteer positions. So I encourage people to be encouraged. The Greece is not, I think it's going to go forward. I'd like to hope that it's going to go forward in this area. Thank you.
One question. What's scaring me is the unemployment rate of young people in South Europe, really scaring to me, because up to my mind it leads to extremism, but it could lead to solidarity. My question is to Professor, is there any benefit young people see to engage with the third sector? In Austria, many people are doing it because it's good to have it in the CV when later on applying for a job, and also the third sector is not so big in Greece, I learned today, but is a potential employer. So, and what's scaring is that the media seems to be suspicious towards the third sector. That's not really helping. But is there a benefit the people know, or is there a benefit which could be showed in public to strengthen the third sector?
Yes, there are benefits. I mean, there are benefits worldwide to be, apart from enriching your CV, networking, opportunities to meet future employers. I agree with you that in this country there is no, I mean, young people are not aware of possible benefits of being involved in voluntary organizations. And that's a good idea. I mean, try to create a list of benefits. If it is a very materialistic society, then think materially. That's the only way. Thank you.
Well, if it's just a marketing problem, indeed, you make a list. I think, in my eyes, you develop personal skills which are vital later on in business. You develop leadership. You develop the capacity of working with other people, of collaborating. I think
of writing, organizational skills, and so on.
Exactly, and if you put that down and you put that in the hands of a marketeer, and you have a grant of a foundation who believe in having youngsters involved in volunteering, then you're off. And I believe it's really key. And it starts, as the lady said, it should start at school. You can involve within the schools the youngsters already in projects in the neighborhoods, that they go and clean up a garden, or they help older people to do the shopping, etc. So it can start very early on. I believe you need to do both, the early education and then the marketing operation.
Can I also add a comment to that? Because it takes me back just to a conversation I was having yesterday evening with one of the medical doctors who's here, who was presenting yesterday. And he was saying how in the last 6 months alone, he obviously flies a lot because he'd had three medical emergencies on flights. And he'd as a doctor, he'd volunteered to respond to these medical emergencies. And he was saying how very differently the airlines had responded to his volunteer efforts. In one case, he felt he'd pretty much been ignored. They hadn't made any comment whatsoever. He'd got off his flight, and then a couple of weeks later, he'd got a voucher for 150 euros, which was nice, but to him it felt like quite a cheap gesture, given that his flight had cost $4,000 or something. In the second instance, the pilot, when they landed, made a speech in front of the whole of the plane and said how what an important job he'd done and how he hadn't needed to do it, and how he'd saved this man's life. And they all gave him a round of applause, and he was given a bottle of champagne, which probably cost a fraction of what the $150 voucher cost, but he felt really valued by the airline and by everyone involved. And I think volunteers, as human beings, we want recognition for our volunteer efforts, and that doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be difficult, but it just needs a little bit of thought. And I think that's something that could perhaps organisations could work to build here.
Okay. Yes, please.
No, I have the mic.
Okay. Then one more question.
I'm Gary Oppenheimer. What I've been hearing has been that people don't get involved because there's a sense that they feel powerless and that they don't have the power to actually do something. And I want to talk about something we had done in the States, which took that very idea and turned it on its head. Ampleharvest.org is a program that helps people donate excess garden produce to local food pantries. What we did is we went to the people who were going to food pantries and we got them packets of seeds for growing food in their backyards, and we encouraged them to grow food in their backyards. Then we encouraged them to take the food that they grew when they grew too much of it and to give it to the food pantry. So the very people who were going to food pantries for getting help were themselves helping the food pantry. It was a very empowering experience for them. They were the agents of change in their own community. And I think that programs that take people and give them a sense of empowerment and accomplishment actually can make things really happen very, very fast, very, very inexpensively, and very informally without any government or big corporate involvement. I just wanted to share that experience because I think it's something that is a model that can work any place on the planet. And I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes. One moment, please.
Thank you. Mr. Houliaras, when you said that the state and the legal system and all the system must strengthen first and then, don't you think that this can be used as an excuse for us for not trying now to do our best? Because we are part of the big system, one after the other. Don't we have to try and bring out our best qualities now? What do you think?
I totally agree with you. What I have said is that interpersonal trust is linked to trust to institutions. Okay? So they go in parallel, but this does not mean that we can do nothing to change our lives. I mean, of course, but both types of trust are linked. So trust to the state reflects interpersonal trust, and then interpersonal trust reflects trust to institutions. So that's it.
Okay, well, since we're running out of time, I just wanted to say that being at this conference the last couple of days and having this conversation here with you, I think one of the positive things that has come out of this crisis, not just in Greece, but worldwide at the moment, is that it creates a platform to have these discussions. And it helps us to no longer take for granted some of the things that we just assumed would be. And hopefully it's a very important step, at least in the case of Greece, hopefully it's a very important step to deal with issues such as trust, transparency, bringing the third sector forward, building capacity, and whatever that may mean for each individual organization or person. And one of the other things I think we can take away from this session is, apart from our individual obligation to actually make something happen, change our own behavior, our own mentalities, to just remember how important collaborations are and that things don't work in isolation. So whether that's a collaboration between the third sector, the state, foundations, or the private sector, social enterprises, and even academia. And just everyone trying to do their best in whatever way they can and moving forward rather than dwelling on the past. I'd like to thank everyone, our panel members, Joanna, my co-moderator, and of course the audience for making this hopefully successful conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you.